Hey friends, hope everybody's doing well. So I've got this desert scene to paint today. It's a scene from Saudi Arabia. You got this beautiful reddish dirt, this kind of gray washed out sky, and then these date palm trees, which are very iconic for that area. So let's take a look at the value study and see how I broke this down. So I've taken the whole scene and then simplified it down so that it's only 3 values. Because there's basically an infinite number of values in this photograph, but I only want to work with 3 because that's way, way easier to do. So I've taken some of these background mountains and made them middle value, and I've painted this all in just Payne's gray. That comes down into this palm tree right here, down into this stand of smaller palm trees, over into some of the shadows of this distant hill here, and then over into this stand of palm trees, and over into this cliff here, up to this shadow side of this mountain, then down into this rock that's near and close to us, and then into the shadow of the rock. And you can see where I've darkened a few of the areas here and there for some added contrast and interest. And then you see also that this middle value forms one big connected shape across the entire composition. And then the white of the paper represents the lightest values. So that's our roadmap that we're going to be following today. So I'm painting on paper today, not a block. So I'm going to need to wet both sides down with a sponge. See how the paper is starting to curl up on the other side? That's one of the reasons that we wet both sides down when we're working with just paper. Because if you wet both sides, it'll lay flat. And it will also stay wet for longer, which is really useful for me living in Arizona where the air is really dry. Similar climate to the scene I'm going to paint today, actually. So this allows me to paint wet into wet for a longer period of time and get those really nice, soft, blooming, flowing effects from the wet into wet. Okay, so let's drop in that washed out sky there. We'll just mix up a light, warm gray color for that. Burnt umber and ultramarine blue are a good way to get grays. Something like that will be fine. I think it's interesting that the sky is kind of overcast, but there's still a very strong light. I kind of like that dichotomy. And since the paper is so damp and wet all the way through, I'll be able to get these really nice, soft effects when I paint. Very, very light sky. Darken up that gray here and there just to hint at some of the shapes of the clouds up there. Like that. Just to make it a little bit more interesting. Alright, so we can start dropping in the color for these hills, kind of a reddish color. It's like a very subtle red. I want to try to get that right. Maybe throw some orange in there. Burnt sienna usually works well for this kind of thing. Yeah, I think it looks about something like that. Painting right through these trees because these are going to be middle value. Quite a bit lighter than what I'm painting now. There's some kind of dead foliage right here. I want to indicate that. Just a few spots of yellow ochre. Just dropping that in ahead of time and letting it fuzz out and bleed a little bit. And as quick as that, the first wash is already done. So I need this paper to dry out, and then we will start the second wash. So I'll be right back. Okay, the paper is dry enough now. Now I'll be able to paint wet onto dry without the paint bleeding everywhere. It'll basically stay where I put it, because I want these lines to be very sharp and defined. So we'll start right here with the shadow side of that cliff face. Get a nice dark mixture of cool gray going. Add some cobalt to make it a more vibrant cool gray. Cobalt blue, that is. I will need to go back and liven up some of the lit edges of this cliff, I'm realizing, but I can do that now once this middle value and dark value washes are completely dry. Once everything is dry, I can go back and do some glazing. If I don't wait till everything is dry, then I'll just end up lifting up the paint that's underneath, and it'll make a big mess. So if you're going to do glazing, you got to wait until it's completely dry. So I'm just trying to stay loose with this. Trying to be confident with my brush strokes and brush placement. I'm liking how that looks so far. So we'll warm that gray up for the stuff that's closer to us. Things that are closer tend to be warmer, things that are farther away tend to be cooler. It's not a hard set rule, but a lot of the time it's true. And that's going to go right into this rock right here that's way up close. So I'm painting around the edge of this, the shape of this palm tree. Just indicating some of these spiky palm fronds. Try to paint around a little bit of the trunk if I can. And I'm going to go back later and make that actually a green color. This is all going to be green, so I'm not painting over that. I'm going to get some green middle value and bleed that color right into this. So the whole idea with this middle value shape is that every piece of the shape is physically connected to the rest of the shape. So I'm actually going to touch this green paint that I'll mix in a second into this shadow color paint. So everything is physically connecting. It makes for a really cool, powerful scene doing that. There's some texture on the background hills there, just a little bit. Don't want to dry your eye too much into that area. So we'll mix up kind of an earthy green, more of that yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, and cobalt blue, but we'll use both for this. It's going to be more on the blue side in order to push this stuff back farther into the background. So it'll be more bluish green. There we go, yeah. Yeah, I need that to dry a lot more before I try to drop green into this area, because it's just going to be fuzzy and indistinct if I do it wet into wet. We'll leave a few highlights here and there, just indicating the shape of these palm fronds in the distance. And we'll kind of break up the top of the shape too to further hint at the texture going on. We're creating the illusion of a lot of detail and texture by just dropping a few brush strokes here and there that show you what's going on. Not painting every single palm frond. I'm just leaving a few white spaces that vaguely look something like a palm frond. It's all illusions. Painting is just creating illusions. Now we can start working on these more close-up palm trees here. I want this yellow to be a little more vibrant, so I'm going to throw in some cadmium yellow. I think this is cadmium yellow. Lemon yellow works just as well if that's what you have. That'll further create more separation between this palm tree here and then the ones in the background, making it a more vibrant green. Yeah, we have lots of date palms in Phoenix, but they're all imported. Actually, every palm tree that we have is imported. It's funny that something that's so iconic when you think of Phoenix is the palm tree, but not a single one of them naturally occurs here. They're all brought from somewhere else. There's one that occurs really close to here, which is the California fan palm, or the Mexican fan palm. And there's one tiny spot way out in the desert near Yuma where you've got some California fan palms that naturally grow in a little canyon. It's called Palm Canyon. Real original name. That's the only place in the whole state where you've got a tiny, tiny stand of naturally occurring palm trees of any kind. So I'm leaving some highlights in the body of the palm tree to indicate the highlighted areas of some of these fronds. And I might go back and scratch out a few more of them once it's more dry. There's some different colored foliage up front that I'm saving space for and painting around with this palm frond green. Same thing in here. There's some like shapes of palm fronds that you can see in the highlights. Yeah, I haven't even added any of the darks, and you can already tell what's going on pretty much. That's how powerful having a big middle value shape is. And I'm really just copying exactly what I did in my value study. I'm just adding color to it this time. And spending a lot more time on the details, but not too much more time. Just enough to get the point across. I really like how this one palm tree just kind of sticks out against the sky. It's got a very powerful shape. Very beautiful trees. I'm just adding a few extra fronds in my painting that aren't in the photo. Make it a little tiny bit more symmetrical. Just adding a few details on the edges of the fronds. Well, that's actually the middle value shape done. That's it. That's all it needs. So I can actually go paint in the color for these palm trees here in the background. add texture to the ground. Clear off some space on my palette. I think I'm going to get the big guy out for this one. This brush is great for painting a big area really fast. Yeah, so I'm just darkening up the area around this path because you can see 2 tire marks that go down the path, and I want to drop that in. Just want to indicate some of these little shrubs out here real quick. While this is wet, I can do that really easily and let it kind of just fuzz out. More clearly define the edge of that path. Okay. Now we can start working some of the darks. We're going to start with this rock right here. Because there's some interesting textures going on that I want to portray. I'm doing it before it's completely 100% dry, so that the shape is just a little fuzzy, which kind of helps it make it look more like it's in the shadow. I found paint wet into slightly wet, I guess. Forgot to add that cast shadow there, but that's alright. It'll look better fuzzy anyway. It'll make it look farther away. There's a few darks going on back here that I kind of started to drop in when this was still wet. Now I can make them more clearly defined. Just helping to bring out the texture of these palm trees a little more. Cast shadow here. So there's some soft textures I'm going to want in this clump of trees here, more towards the bottom. So I can drop that in while this shape is still wet. Okay, I need this to dry up a little bit, and then I'll finish out the finer details. Okay. We'll tap out a little more texture on the ground too. Drop in some of those shrubs, just the shadow sides, and the little cast shadows they're making. Alright, I think we're going to call this one finished. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you on the next one.